you must understand something fundamental. Anger is a loss of control. It is not strength. It is weakness disguised as power. If you find yourself constantly irritated, constantly bothered by what people say or do, then you are not in control of yourself. You are being puppeteered by external forces. And that's a terrible place to be. So how do you break free from this? How do you become immune to the petty words and actions of others? Mastering yourself before trying to master others is the foundation of a life that is unshaken by external disturbances. If you do not have control over your own emotions, your own impulses, your own thoughts, then you are constantly at the mercy of external forces, people, situations, inconveniences, and even your own misinterpretations of reality. And when you are at the mercy of something outside of yourself, you are weak. You are easily rattled, easily provoked, and easily manipulated. This is not the path of someone who is strong, who is competent, who is aiming upward. To gain mastery over yourself, you first need to recognize that anger and irritation are signals that something within you is out of alignment. They are not inherently bad. In fact, anger itself is not necessarily a negative emotion. It is an indicator that you perceive something as unjust, as threatening, or as frustrating. But the real question is, do you control your anger, or does it control you? That distinction makes all the difference. When you react impulsively, without reflection, you have lost control. Your emotions dictate your actions rather than your rational mind. And when that happens, you are no longer the master of yourself. You have handed over that power to something else. If you want to be unbothered by others, if you want to be a fortress that does not shake at the first sign of opposition, then you must bring order to your own being. That starts with self-awareness. You must observe yourself honestly, without flattery and without excuse. What situations set you off? What words make you react? What types of people trigger an emotional response in you? And most importantly, why? The more you understand these triggers, the more you begin to see that your anger is often not about the external event itself. It is about how you have conditioned yourself to react to it. Once you identify these patterns, the next step is to consciously disrupt them. When you feel irritation rise, stop. Do not react immediately. Breathe, observe, ask yourself, is this truly worth my energy? More often than not, you will find that it is not. The person who just insulted you, the one who cut you off in traffic, the colleague who made a rude remark, do they truly deserve your emotional investment? Or is your reaction simply a habit you have yet to unlearn? The moment you hesitate before reacting, you begin to reclaim control. Discipline is a crucial element of this process. You cannot master yourself without a disciplined mind and a disciplined body. If you are constantly overstimulated, if your mind is cluttered with distractions, if your body is weak from lack of physical exertion, then you are much more likely to be irritable, impatient, and reactionary. Strength comes from structure. Wake up early, exercise, read, set goals, push yourself beyond comfort. When you discipline yourself in these areas, you naturally become less susceptible to emotional turbulence. You become stable, solid, and unaffected by trivial matters. Another critical aspect of mastering yourself is learning to detach from the illusion of control over others. Many people get frustrated because they expect the world to conform to their desires. They want people to act a certain way, to think a certain way, to treat them with a certain level of respect. But reality does not operate according to personal expectations. People are unpredictable. They will be rude. They will misunderstand you. They will behave in ways you find annoying or irrational. If you hinge your peace of mind on the actions of others, you will always be frustrated. The solution is acceptance, not passive resignation, but the active acknowledgement that the only thing you truly control is yourself. This acceptance does not mean you tolerate disrespect or allow others to walk over you. On the contrary, it makes you more powerful because when you are no longer emotionally reactive, you can respond with calculated precision. You can decide with clarity whether a situation is worth engaging in or whether it is best ignored. You can choose when to speak and when to walk away, all without being driven by unchecked emotion. Mastery of the self also involves refining your perspective. What offends you today may not even register as an annoyance in 5 years. If you take a step back and view your life on a grand scale, you begin to realize how insignificant most daily frustrations truly are. Ask yourself, will this matter in a year? In 5 years? In 10? If the answer is no, then why allow it to disturb your peace in the present? Furthermore, adopt the mindset that every irritation is a test, a challenge to strengthen your discipline. Instead of seeing frustration as a reason to react, see it as an opportunity to practice self-control. Every time you successfully resist an emotional outburst, you reinforce the habit of stability. Over time, you become unshakable. And that is the goal, to reach a state where you do not merely suppress anger, but where you transcend it, where you are not repressing emotions, but have trained yourself to view them differently, where you do not need external validation, nor do you fear external criticism, because you have built a foundation of strength, of understanding, of absolute control over the only thing that truly matters, yourself. Taking full responsibility for your reactions is one of the most liberating yet challenging things you can do. It requires a radical shift in perspective, a willingness to accept that no one, under any circumstances, has the power to control your emotions unless you allow them to. This is a truth that many resist because it places the burden of change entirely on the individual. It is much easier to blame others for our anger, to say they made me mad or they provoked me. But the moment you say that, you have already lost. You have admitted that your emotional state is dictated by forces outside of yourself. That is the mindset of someone who is powerless, not of someone who is in control. The first step in taking responsibility for your reactions is to recognize that emotions are not automatic responses. They are choices. Many believe that anger or irritation is something that happens to them, as if they are passive recipients of emotional waves that crash over them without warning. This is not true. Your mind interprets events based on conditioned responses that you have learned over time. If someone insults you and you immediately feel anger, it is not because the insult forced you to react that way. It is because you have consciously or unconsciously trained yourself to react with anger in that scenario. But here's the crucial insight. If you have been conditioned to react a certain way, you can also recondition yourself to respond differently. This reconditioning starts with awareness. The next time you feel yourself getting angry, pause, observe the feeling. Where is it coming from? What exactly are you reacting to? Most people never take the time to analyze their own emotions. They simply feel and react. But the moment you slow down and examine the process, you begin to see the cracks in your automatic responses. You begin to notice that your anger is often disproportionate to the situation. You realize that much of what bothers you is rooted in your ego, in an unconscious demand that the world operate according to your expectations. And when the world does not comply, you become frustrated. This is where personal responsibility comes in. If you recognize that your anger is a result of your own expectations and interpretations, then you also recognize that you have the power to change those interpretations. Instead of seeing a rude comment as an attack, you can see it as irrelevant. Instead of viewing a mistake as a personal failure, you can view it as a lesson. Instead of assuming that people's bad behavior is meant to hurt you, you can acknowledge that most people are acting out their own insecurities and struggles. The way you interpret the world is entirely within your control. And once you truly understand this, you become immune to manipulation. Taking responsibility for your reactions also means eliminating excuses. People say, I couldn't help it, or that's just how I am. These are lies people tell themselves to avoid the effort of change. You can help it. You are not a slave to your emotions. But taking control requires discipline, and discipline is uncomfortable. It means practicing restraint when you want to lash out. It means thinking before you speak. analyzing before you act. It means refusing to let temporary emotions dictate permanent consequences. This is not easy, but it is the price of real strength. Another crucial part of mastering your reactions is understanding that anger is often an attempt to shift responsibility onto others. When you get angry at someone, what are you really doing? You are trying to punish them for making you feel a certain way. You want them to suffer because you suffered. But if you take full responsibility for your emotions, then you have no one to blame but yourself. And if you are the only one responsible, then getting angry at others becomes pointless. Instead of wasting energy on resentment, you can redirect that energy toward self-improvement. Imagine two people insulted in the same way. One immediately reacts with rage, feeling personally attacked. The other shrugs it off, unaffected. The difference is not in what was said. It is in how each person interprets and responds to the situation. The first person remains trapped in emotional reactivity, easily provoked and controlled. The second person is free because they refuse to hand over their power to someone else. Which person do you want to be? This philosophy extends beyond anger. If you take responsibility for your emotions, you also take responsibility for your happiness, your peace of mind, and your overall well-being. You stop waiting for the world to give you peace and instead cultivate it within yourself. No longer do you say, "I'll be happy when people treat me better," or "I'll be at peace when my circumstances improve." You say, "I am in control of my state of mind, regardless of external events." This does not mean you suppress your emotions or pretend things don't affect you. It means you develop the ability to choose how you respond. It means you acknowledge your feelings without being ruled by them. You are allowed to feel anger, but you do not have to act on it. You are allowed to feel frustration, but you do not have to let it consume you. The key is to create space between stimulus and response. That space is where your power lies. Over time, as you cultivate this discipline, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice that situations that once provoked you no longer have the same effect. You start to laugh at things that used to make you furious. You feel a sense of detachment, not in a cold or indifferent way, but in a way that signifies control. You are no longer a puppet to your own emotions, and as a result, you become unbothered, not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. True strength is not in how loudly you can express your anger, but in how well you can control it. True freedom is not in forcing others to behave a certain way, but in mastering your own reactions. The path to unshakable confidence, to resilience, to peace of mind lies in radical self-responsibility. The moment you accept this fully, you step into a level of power that most people will never reach, because most people would rather blame than change. But not you. You take control, you take responsibility. And because of that, no one will ever have power over you again. Understanding, rather than judging, is a fundamental shift in how you perceive the world and the people around you. Most people operate under the assumption that others should behave in a way that aligns with their personal standards, that the world should function according to their expectations, and that when someone acts in a way that they find irritating, rude, or offensive, that person is wrong, and therefore they deserve judgment. But this perspective is not only flawed, it is self-defeating. It traps you in a cycle of constant frustration, constantly reacting to people's behavior as if the world exists to meet your personal preferences. To truly be free from anger and emotional turmoil, you must shift your mindset. Instead of immediately reacting with judgment, deciding that someone is rude, ignorant, or even malicious, train yourself to first understand. Ask yourself, why is this person acting this way? What could be driving them? What is their perspective? The moment you engage in this level of analysis, your emotional reaction begins to shift. You are no longer taking things personally. You are observing rather than reacting. And in that space of observation, you find power. The reality is that people's actions are almost never about you. They are about them, their experiences, their struggles, their fears, and their conditioning. A person who lashes out in anger is likely dealing with something far beyond the immediate situation. Perhaps they were never taught how to regulate their emotions. Perhaps they are carrying stress from a personal failure or a deep insecurity. Perhaps they are simply having a terrible day. If you assume the worst, that they are malicious, that they are attacking you personally, you will react with anger, resentment, or defensiveness. But if you assume that they are acting out of their own unresolved struggles, then suddenly your need to react diminishes. Consider a scenario where a stranger insults you in public. Your immediate conditioned response might be anger. After all, they have disrespected you, and your instincts tell you to defend yourself. But what do you gain from reacting? Will arguing with this stranger improve your life in any way? Or will it simply drag you into the same emotional chaos they are trapped in? Instead of responding with judgment, this person is an idiot, this person is awful, try shifting your perspective. This person is suffering in some way, and I do not have to participate in that suffering. This mindset is not about being passive or weak. It is about choosing where to invest your energy. If you get angry at every rude comment, every inconsiderate action, every perceived slight, then you are essentially allowing other people to dictate your emotional state. You are handing over your peace of mind to every flawed human being you encounter. But if you choose understanding instead, you remain in control. You decide whether something is even worth your reaction. Another crucial aspect of understanding rather than judging is recognizing that people do not all share the same level of awareness, intelligence, or emotional control. Some people are simply more reactive, more impulsive, more prone to negativity. And while it is easy to judge them for this, it is also completely pointless. Expecting everyone to be wise, rational, and emotionally stable is unrealistic. The world is filled with people who have been shaped by difficult environments, by poor role models, by misinformation, or by personal struggles they have not yet overcome. If you judge them for these things, you only frustrate yourself. If you understand them, however, you can engage with them or ignore them with a level of peace that is unavailable to those who insist on viewing everything through the lens of moral judgment. The same principle applies to personal relationships. If someone close to you says something hurtful, your first instinct may be to assume bad intent, to think that they are deliberately trying to hurt you, that they are being selfish or cruel. But more often than not, people's words and actions are not as personal as they seem. People speak out of emotion, out of misunderstanding, out of their own insecurities. If you immediately judge them, you react emotionally. But if you take a moment to understand, you may see that their words were not really about you. They were about something deeper within themselves. This does not mean you excuse toxic behavior or tolerate mistreatment. Understanding is not the same as enabling. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, then by all means, set boundaries, remove yourself from the situation if necessary, but do so from a place of clarity, not from a place of emotional reaction. Instead of lashing out or holding on to resentment, you simply recognize this person is acting out their own issues, and I do not need to participate in their dysfunction. And then you move forward unaffected. A powerful way to cultivate this mindset is to apply it to yourself first. Think of the times you have acted irrationally, the moments you have been short-tempered, unkind, or thoughtless. Did you do those things because you are a terrible person? Or were you simply reacting to your own struggles, your own blind spots, your own emotions at the time? If you can acknowledge that you have acted out of imperfection, then you must also acknowledge that others do the same. And if you can forgive yourself for these moments, you can extend that same grace to others, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Over time, this mindset becomes automatic. You stop seeing the world as a battlefield where you must constantly defend yourself, and you start seeing it as a place where people are simply doing the best they can with the knowledge and tools they have. Some people are wise, some are foolish, some are kind, some are cruel, but none of them have the power to dictate your emotions unless you give it to them. When you shift from judgment to understanding, life becomes lighter. You no longer carry the unnecessary weight of resentment, of frustration, of pointless conflict. You realize that much of what once angered you was never about you to begin with. And in that realization, you become unshakable. Emotional resilience is the ability to remain stable and unshaken in the face of life's challenges, annoyances, and provocations. It is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending that things do not affect you. Rather, it is about strengthening yourself to the point where you can endure discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. The stronger you become, the less you are bothered by external events or by the behavior of others. The more resilient you are, the less power anyone or anything has over your emotional state. Building this resilience starts with exposure. If you always avoid discomfort, if you run away from situations that test your patience or challenge your emotions, you will never develop the strength needed to remain unaffected. Think of physical training. If you never push your muscles beyond their current capacity, they will never grow stronger. The same principle applies to your emotional endurance. You must willingly place yourself in situations that challenge your ability to remain calm, that provoke you, that test your patience, and instead of reacting as you always have, you practice control. You endure the discomfort without letting it dictate your actions. Over time, your threshold for frustration increases. What once irritated or angered you now barely registers. You become stronger, not because the world has become easier, but because you have become tougher. One of the greatest sources of emotional fragility is the illusion that life should be fair, that people should always be reasonable, that everything should go according to plan. This mindset is dangerous because it sets you up for constant disappointment. The world is not fair. People are not always rational. Life does not always unfold the way you expect. The sooner you accept this, the less you will be disturbed when things do not go your way. Expect challenges, expect setbacks, expect that people will sometimes be rude, unkind, or inconsiderate. When you stop being surprised by these things, you stop being bothered by them. A critical component of resilience is emotional regulation, the ability to feel an emotion without being controlled by it. This is especially important with anger and frustration. Many people believe that emotions happen to them, that if they feel anger, they have no choice but to express it. But this is false. There is always a space between feeling and action, and in that space lies your ability to choose how you respond. The more you practice extending that space, pausing, reflecting, choosing rather than reacting, the stronger your emotional control becomes. Breathing techniques, mindfulness, and self-reflection all play a role in this process. When you feel irritation rising, slow your breath. Focus your attention on the present moment rather than the thought that triggered your frustration. Ask yourself, does this truly matter? Will this still bother me in a week, a month, a year? More often than not, the answer is no. Recognizing this allows you to let go of unnecessary emotional reactions before they take control of you. Physical resilience also plays a role in emotional resilience. Your mind and body are not separate. They influence each other constantly. A weak body often contributes to a weak emotional state. If you are constantly exhausted, if you do not take care of your physical health, if your body is weak and undisciplined, your ability to manage stress and frustration diminishes. Strengthening your body through exercise, proper nutrition, and disciplined routines fortifies your mental and emotional endurance. A physically strong person is far less likely to be rattled by small inconveniences or annoyances. Resilience is also built through self-reliance. The more you depend on external validation, on people treating you a certain way, on situations unfolding as you prefer, the more vulnerable you are to frustration and disappointment. But the less you expect from others, the less you need external circumstances to be ideal in order to remain at peace, the stronger you become. True resilience comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you can handle it, that no matter how people behave, you will not be shaken, that no matter what difficulties arise, you will endure and adapt. Another essential part of resilience is shifting your perspective on hardship. Many people see obstacles, setbacks, and difficulties as negative, as things that should not happen, as injustices that must be resented. But this mindset weakens you. The strongest individuals see hardship as an opportunity. Every difficulty is a chance to strengthen yourself. Every annoying or difficult person is a chance to practice patience and self-control. Every setback is a lesson in endurance. The more you train yourself to see challenges in this way, the less they will bother you. Instead of being frustrated by adversity, you will embrace it as part of your growth. Resilient people do not waste time complaining. They do not indulge in self-pity. They do not blame others for their emotional state. Instead, they take full ownership of their reactions, their mindset, and their ability to adapt. They understand that nothing external can truly harm them unless they allow it to, and because of this, they are unshakable. When you cultivate this level of resilience, you no longer react impulsively. You do not get drawn into pointless arguments. You do not let minor inconveniences ruin your day. You do not allow other people's negativity to become your own. You remain calm, composed, in control. And in doing so, you become truly free because nothing and no one can disturb the peace you have built within yourself. Mastering detachment is one of the most powerful tools for maintaining emotional stability. It does not mean indifference, nor does it mean suppressing emotions. Rather, it is about developing the ability to step back from situations, observe them objectively, and choose your response, rather than being pulled into an automatic emotional reaction. Detachment allows you to engage with the world without being consumed by it. It enables you to care about people without being controlled by their opinions or behaviors. It gives you the ability to act with clarity and purpose rather than out of impulsive emotional reflexes. At the core of detachment is the understanding that most of what disturbs people emotionally is rooted in attachment to outcomes, to how they are perceived, to their expectations of how things should be. When you attach yourself too strongly to a particular result, you become vulnerable to disappointment, frustration, and anger. If things do not go the way you want, you feel as if something has been taken from you. If people do not treat you the way you expect, you feel personally wronged. But when you practice detachment, you learn to release the need for control over these things. You recognize that the world does not operate according to your preferences, and you stop fighting against reality. This does not mean that you should not care about anything. It means that you engage fully in what you do, but remain independent of the outcome. You work hard, but you do not become emotionally devastated if things do not go as planned. You form relationships, but you do not place your entire sense of self-worth in how others treat you. You express your opinions, but you do not feel the need to argue endlessly to prove you are right. You develop an internal sense of peace that is not dictated by external events. One of the most effective ways to cultivate detachment is to shift your focus from control to acceptance. Many people spend their lives trying to control things that are inherently outside of their power. Other people's actions, external circumstances, random events. When things do not align with their expectations, they become angry, anxious, or disappointed. But the reality is, the only thing you truly control is yourself. Your thoughts, your actions, your perspective. Everything else is unpredictable. When you accept this fact deeply, you stop wasting energy trying to force the world to conform to your desires, and instead you focus on mastering your own response to whatever happens. This mindset is particularly useful when dealing with difficult people. If you are attached to the idea that people should always be kind, respectful, and rational, then every encounter with a rude or irrational person will frustrate you. But if you accept that people are flawed, that they often act out of their own ignorance or suffering, you stop expecting perfection from them. Their behavior no longer feels like a personal attack. It simply is what it is. Instead of reacting emotionally, you observe, you decide whether it is worth engaging, and then you move forward, unaffected. Another critical aspect of detachment is letting go of the need for validation. Many people are deeply affected by the opinions of others. They crave approval, fear criticism, and become distressed when they are misunderstood or judged. But attachment to validation is one of the fastest ways to lose control over your emotions. If your sense of self-worth is tied to how others perceive you, then you are constantly at the mercy of external forces. The opinions of others fluctuate, often based on their own biases, insecurities, or misunderstandings. If you allow those opinions to dictate how you feel about yourself, you will never have peace. Detachment allows you to listen without being controlled, to hear criticism without being wounded, and to engage with people without needing their approval. This does not mean ignoring feedback. It means filtering it objectively. If criticism is valid, you learn from it. If it is baseless, you discard it without emotional distress. You no longer seek constant reassurance because you have developed an internal sense of confidence that does not rely on the shifting perspectives of others. Practicing detachment also helps in handling stress and uncertainty. Life is unpredictable, and many people become anxious because they try to resist this fact. They want certainty, guarantees, a sense of control over the future, but the future is never fully within your control. No matter how much you plan, things can change in an instant. Instead of being paralyzed by this uncertainty, detachment allows you to embrace it. You stop fearing the unknown because you trust in your own ability to adapt. You recognize that clinging too tightly to any specific outcome only creates suffering. A powerful technique to reinforce detachment is mental distancing. When faced with a stressful situation, instead of immediately reacting, take a step back. Imagine you are an outsider observing the situation from a distance. What would you advise someone else in your position? This simple shift in perspective creates space between you and your emotions, allowing you to respond rationally rather than impulsively. Over time, detachment becomes second nature. You stop overreacting to minor annoyances. You stop holding on to resentment over things you cannot change. You stop fearing failure because you no longer tie your self-worth to external achievements. You develop a sense of inner stability, one that is not easily shaken by external events. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about choosing which emotions deserve your energy and which do not. Some things in life are worth deep emotional investment: your purpose, your values, your loved ones. But the vast majority of daily frustrations, conflicts, and disappointments do not deserve to disrupt your peace. By mastering detachment, you gain control over your mind, your reactions, and ultimately your life. If you truly wish to never be angered or bothered by anyone, you must take full responsibility for your own mind, your emotions, and your reactions. The world is unpredictable, people are flawed, and life will never conform perfectly to your expectations. But none of that has the power to disturb you unless you allow it. By strengthening your mind and disciplining your emotions, you create an internal state of resilience that is immune to the chaos around you. By understanding others rather than judging them, you strip away the illusion that their actions are personal attacks, realizing instead that they are simply operating from their own limitations. By building emotional endurance, you become capable of withstanding discomfort and remaining composed even in the face of provocation. By cultivating detachment, you liberate yourself from the need for external validation, from the illusion of control, and from the constant struggle against things that do not deserve your energy. Ultimately, true freedom comes not from controlling the world, but from mastering yourself. When you reach this level of self-mastery, you no longer react impulsively, you no longer feel the need to prove anything, and you no longer allow small disturbances to consume your peace. You move through life with clarity, purpose, and an unshakable sense of control over your own destiny. That is the path to true strength. And that is the key to never being angered or bothered by anyone again.